Thanks, Prakash. While the panel gets seated, welcome everyone. Thank you to the TiE Inflect team for letting us have this discussion. As you know, the FinTech movement started mostly because of kind of startups operationally agile compared to kind of incumbent financial services that had specific segment-specific offerings or reduced cost to serve, but fundamentally operationally agile. So what you heard in the previous panel was kind of the incumbent of financial services perspective. We're going to hear similar perspective or similar questions, but from a startup angle. My name is Paddy Ramanathan. I run a FinTech accelerator right here in the Bay Area in San Ramon, iValley. Our website's iValley.co. You can look at some of our companies and what we do. But we have a little bit of time, and I'm told we're running a few minutes late. So let's get started with a round of introductions. Maybe, Amy, if you can start us off with a little bit about yourself and your company.
Sure. So Amy Guarino, I'm the COO of Kyndi, which is an explainable AI company. I'm an IBMer. Historically, I've worked here in the Valley for a long time and then a bunch of startups. Most recently, I was a 25th employee at a company called Marketo, which is one of the sponsors here today. When I joined in 2009, just a tiny little company, less than $1 million in revenue. We went public in 2013, sold the business to Vista Private Equity for $2 billion, just under $2 billion in 2016. So I decided to go back to early stage, and I'm the COO at Kyndi.
Alex?
Hello, my name is Alex Fedosseev. I'm CEO of company One World Online, based in Silicon Valley for 20 plus years, and was lucky enough to have 3 successful exits in telecom, broadband, smart home, Internet of Things space. And now in the media tech, which I consider the most exciting piece. My company did a successful ICO last year. We raised about 11 million in crypto. So we're building token economy. A lot of people talking about blockchain, we're actually doing it. And I'm happy to share my experiences and observations.
Hi, my name is Ken Sohm, the co-founder and CEO of Flowcast. We are a fintech startup disrupting a century-old trade finance industry. It's one of those industry that, biggest in the world, but nobody has heard of. What we do is we provide an AI machine learning platform to help banks and non-banks to enhance the credit decisioning in trade finance. Before Flowcast, I've been in the Valley for most of my career. I've been in M&A for both investment banks and large corporates. I've done deals, over $4 billion. This is currently my third startup.
Hi, my name is Prakash Goswami. I'm the founder and CEO of VestEdu, which is a peer-to-peer marketplace lending platform to refinance international student loans, which is primarily the non-FICO population who doesn't have a solid credit history in this country. So before starting this, I was with PayPal and Visa, and we are very early stage. I would love to share my experience and what we are trying to do.
Great, thanks. Very diverse panels, as you can see. So maybe start you, Amy, being the only lady in the panel. Let's start off with you. So artificial intelligence is a big thing now, and we've been told it's going to drive our cars, but also maybe manage our finances. So where do you think artificial intelligence best applied in financial services? And in your introduction, you talked about explainable AI. So talk. What does explainable AI mean?
Sure. So it's a very, very exciting time. Being here in the Valley, I've seen a number of kind of things change and new cycles come up. And AI is certainly going to change all of our lives in many ways. In financial services, what's really interesting is the amount of unstructured data or text that's out there, and it's just not accessible, and you can't really get the value out of it. Our CEO was working on Wall Street during the financial crisis, and he was a quant. And some of his partners came to him a few days before Lehman declared bankruptcy and said, hey, look, we really need to understand what's going to be the impact of this situation. And he said, well, that shouldn't be a problem. And then he realized they had not built that option into the model. So the only way to really understand that was to go back and literally read all of the different loan documents. And that was a 3-year process, because what he recognized then and what still is today is that we don't read any faster than our parents or our grandparents, and so we're really the bottleneck in today's production process. So what we're able to do is analyze text, and we can do that in a way then that will expose different signals or insights. So from a financial services sector, and why it's important to explainable is, today a lot of AI is tied to machine learning or deep learning. And in that situation, somebody's applying an algorithm and they're coming up with a response. In the financial industry and a lot of other regulatory or industries that are regulated, that's not allowed. It's not legal to be able to come to somebody and say, I processed your mortgage application and you didn't get it, but I can't tell you why, because it was the algorithm. So we've tied together a number of different approaches from a technology standpoint to be able to provide that explanation. So by ingesting unstructured data, all of this kind of documents that are available within an organization like a bank, really understanding those documents, understanding the signals, and then being able to provide an audit trail as to how we came up with a decision, that's what we're able to do.
Great, brave new world. Looking forward to all those developments happening, Amy. Alex, so blockchain, I know, is going to solve world hunger, or so everybody believes. But before it does that, and let not the audience get the cue that it's lunchtime, we want them to stay here. Lunch is not being served till we finish here. So talk about how blockchain can fundamentally change or could change the infrastructure of the internet. And consequently, if it does, if internet becomes infrastructure with blockchain and distributed ledgers and information and value, and we talk about the internet of value, and you're close to digital marketing. So how does that impact the digital marketing? Not so much the fintech, but the businesses of search and social media on the internet. Talk a little bit about how that can happen.
Right. That's a great question, and there are many tectonic changes going on in fintech, media, and marketing, as you probably know and see it all around. Even the giants like Facebook and Google and many others are not quite covering the needs of today's marketing. For example, all of these giants are out of ICO promotions, which means they don't want to deal with it, but at the same time it's the most innovative and most interesting part of what people want to promote today. New applications, new platforms, new monetization models. I believe that the first and most important part of new marketing paradigm is turning things back to people. People want to own their own data. People want to be incentivized for everything they do online. People want to be not passive but active participants on every process, including marketing. And so incentives and the fintech coming to marketing area right now is becoming reality. Many loyalty programs existed for a long time. We all know about miles, we all know about the brand loyalty programs. Now with tokens it's becoming much more tangible and much more attractive for people, because they can take these tokens and not only use them inside of application, but also if they're already on Ethereum blockchain, for example, take them to exchanges or use them outside of the system. So the whole landscape is reshaping. We have quite a few pilots going on in the US and also in India. Like our great partners, Brand Capital and Times Group of India in particular, helped us to run a few campaigns, and we measured the conversion rates, and they're amazing. We're going 3x, 4x higher than traditional Facebook, Google AdWords, and so on. Why? Because there's incentive in the picture. Second is because we engage people first before we advertise to them. And I think a major shift that's happening today on the market as many brands, many companies combining their marketing budgets and research budgets into one type of projects. And it works much better because you can promote something to people, you can measure their feedback, you can position your product better, make it more targeted. So this is a lot of trends all coming together. And why blockchain is important? Because incentives, you can put your tokens on blockchain because of the verifiability of data. So the votes coming back or the transactions can be placed on the blockchain. And we use a combination of internal and external blockchain, by the way, the so-called state channel approach, and many other aspects. But keep long story short, is coming from both ends. But most importantly, people are part of it now, not just the subject of promotions, but the participants. They're part of dialogue.
Yeah, so fundamentally, I think blockchain can expand fintech and get into the internet businesses. And we've used the term Finternet, expansion of fintech. But that's great. So Ken, There's a lot being done in the consumer banking space, right? So even folks like Apple and Google are into payments, right? At some point, there were like 25 companies doing mobile payments for consumers. There's digital banks, there's small business lending. What's not talked about much in FinTech is the impact of emerging technologies, new models in the commercial banking space. I know you're very close to it. You're already doing some work internationally. Talk us a little bit about what's going on in FinTech and commercial banking.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the commercial side, it certainly has lagged quite a bit on the consumer. But to answer that question, I think the first is you have to ask, what's really driving it? What is the fundamental client need? And in our world, as we look at, what is the corporate needs today, one of the key drivers is that a lot of corporate clients are relentless in driving their cash flow. So they've been, and one of the levers for them to drive their cash flow is to extend the payment terms with their suppliers. And there's an adverse impact on that supply chain. For example, Boeing has moved their payment terms from 90 days to 120 days, and Anheuser-Busch is now 160 days. So that's billions of dollars literally kind of put onto a lot of stress onto that supply chain. And banks have to go and provide capital and money to alleviate that stress. The problem is the banks are not profitable as they try to get into the smaller businesses, the smaller suppliers. And that's really where a lot of these new technologies are coming up to help solve these problems. Blockchain has obviously been a great promise in terms of providing smart contracts to get rid of this whole paper-based documentary trade. That is that's to unlock that to lower that operating cost. Where we play is in AI, where we're providing a much more accurate way of predicting creditworthiness of these suppliers, and thereby lowering the cost of capital and lowering the lending costs to the borrowers and to the banks. In 5 years, we believe that every credit decisions will be driven by AI and machine learning. We don't believe AI is going to completely replace a credit officer, but a credit officer who uses AI, we believe will fundamentally kind of replace those who don't.
Great. So a lot of changes in credit decisioning as well as cash management and also international trade. Prakash, so we heard about AI, how that can transform. We heard about blockchain, expansive. We heard about commercial banking. Ken alluded a little bit to the credit. But the whole FinTech movement, if you think about it, started with credit when the credit had evaporated in 2008. Small business lenders like OnDeck and all, which are now publicly traded companies, marketplace lenders like Lending Club, SoFi. So what's going on? You're close to the credit side of FinTech. So what's going on in the credit side? Where are some untapped potential in the credit, or is the market oversaturated?
So let me take a little bit step back, and in FinTech in general, I think the success depends on three key pillars. One is the user experience, how frictionless you can make it. And the more frictionless it is, the more people will adapt to it or try to use that service. The second pillar is the customer acquisition cost, means how cheaply you can acquire a customer. And those are the strategic initiatives that needs to be blended into the business plan. And then the third and most critical element is the risk assessment or credit worthiness assessment. And each different company, they found their secret sauce. Like Prosper claims they have a separate model, Lending Club has a different model, SoFi has different model. But I think that all of those three companies that I mentioned, their major component of their credit worthiness is the traditional FICO-based model. And FICO encompasses several thousands of data points into their algorithm, and then they are in the market for several decades. And I think that's a very good indicator. But people's credit worthiness is also can be derived from a different other dimensions. Say, for example, the ability to pay back or intent to pay back. and ability is pretty quantifiable aspect that you can kind of do the mathematical algebraic calculations. The intent part is a little tricky. It has a cultural component, social footprint, how they are connected in the social network. There is a several years ago, there was the microfinance, they got a Nobel Prize, and I think Muhammad Yunus, his model was the trusting the local women community, because they are more sensitive to the social negative vibe or negative reputation. So how do we capture all those? And that's how I think all these different startups, they find their niche area based on their understanding about their customer base, and they found a secret sauce along those lines, and that's how probably they started. There is interesting trend is happening as we are adopting AI, and some of those decision-making process are automated using AI, such as one example is like, there is a traditional data point. If you know your social security number, how much time it takes, how many seconds or microseconds it takes for you to type that on the keyboard. Versus if you are stealing somebody's social security number, you do not know, you need to read those numbers and then type it. Those are the AI application, simple form, but those are the couple of use cases that AI can be helpful to automate some of these process. If it takes longer than this, that means there is a probability of the fraudulent data is going on. Or similarly with the driver license, etc. So there are a lot of innovations are happening around that space, and we try to kind of read through all those and going. Our MVP is particularly for the non-FICO population, and we can talk more about my business after the panel. But I think that's where the trend is happening, is more the segregation or the competitiveness is being created along those three pillars. And combination of, because you cannot focus typically in one dimension and then neglect the other two, then your startup or your business model will suffer. But all three, how you create a balance among these three-legged stool, that's your secret sauce.
Fascinating. So we'll do a quick round of reverse questions, maybe start with there. Yeah. We have two mics in the front. If there are questions from the audience, if you want to line up, I think we'll have some time to give the audience a chance to ask questions too. So Prakash, I was fascinated with what you said, although one part of me thinks that Facebook or even Cambridge Analytica can do a better credit decision on us than, say, some others. So what is the risk there of collecting all this information? What's the role of privacy and all that? Is it an opt-in method? Talk a little bit about that.
So there are two school of thoughts. The one, heavy Facebook users or Twitter or Instagram users, they will probably not agree with me. They will think, oh, privacy is a foregone thing. Once you are using a digital media, your every footprint is there. All the crumbs that we are kind of sprinkling around in the internet, it is already there. Why to care? As long as you are getting the best experience out of our product or services. And then the other school of thought is like, no, I don't want to give up my personal information, because there is once that is being leaked and my credit card is stolen and extra charge is been applied on I am the one who is going to suffer. So there is I think the people are in the stage where they are choosing one versus the other at any given point of time, and I think the Cambridge Analytica or those kind of misuse of the AI, I will call, is putting a brake on some of the adoption.
Okay. So, Ken, you talked about cash management and trade finance. There's a lot going on in trade finance. So do you potentially see banks getting out of the trade finance business? It's a big cash cow for them. Do you see startups kind of coming and playing just like it's happened in consumers?
Yeah, I do see there's a real threat to banks and trade finance. On the one hand, banks have very cheap money. They have a lot of customers. On the other hand, you have the big tech giants like Amazon, Alibaba, and recently you've seen QuickBook and all these other smaller outfits that are starting working capital financing and trade financing, taking shares away, mostly in the underserved areas where small businesses are not getting capital from banks. But I do see that those who own the ecosystem, knowing at the beginning of a surge to actual payment, like in Amazon, Alibaba, those are going to be the winners in the long run. So if I look at the top 5 lists of the market leaders in trade finance, it won't be the banks in 5 years. It's likely going to be one of those incumbents or the big tech giants.
Interesting, and we're seeing something overseas. Like I think the previous panel talked about Alipay and others doing some of that already. So Alex, you've done a successful ICO. So my question's not around, there's a lot of stuff around it, regulatory and things like that, but I was at a thing with some venture capitalists and what they said that ICOs are not really disrupting venture capital, but a lot of the talent that typically comes to VC-funded companies, and this being a conference of entrepreneurs, they are going and doing their own tokens and ICOs and things. So will ICOs have a significant impact on the venture capital business? What's your perspective?
That's a good question. Just a really quick test on audience. Initial coin offering ICOs, anybody was involved? Anybody was really doing something? Okay, not many, but okay. It's a very popular concept. It was in 2017, it was really epidemic, and now it's continuing, but more and more mature companies are doing this initial coin offering. To answer your question, absolutely. It's already exceeded in terms of funding, the venture capital traditional funding, at least in the US and I think globally too. So that's already happening, it's our new reality. And there's so many reasons for companies to do ICO. It's not just fundraising. You can get your customers together with fundraising, which is a very important thing. No VC in the world can do it for you. And VCs are smart people, of course. They understand that the era coming to the end. Crowdfunding came first, now ICO coming next. A lot of smart people switching jobs and joining the party. And what's interesting, sometimes they say negative things about ICOs, like Jamie Dimon and the Warren Buffett of the world, so George Soros recently. But in reality, all of the venture funds like Venrock and others are investing in ICOs. And by the way, investing is just one piece. Of course, there is mining, there is investing, but most important is the building token economies, because that's the most exciting part of ICO. And all talented people that understand the future of FinTech, they moving on the bright side of the world.
Great. And no questions so far in front of the mic, but if you do have a question for around ICOs, this is maybe the time to come stand in front of the mic so that I know there's a question lined up. So while he comes, Amy, I've worked in financial services for a long time. Heavily regulated industry, 2008, we saw that. Dodd-Frank came and now pulling back, now new administration in Washington. But conceivably, with your concept of explainable AI, can an AI system kind of read in or ingest regulations, laws, all applicable, and they change? And there are different regulations. There's Fair Credit Act in, say, lending that you cannot discriminate, but then there's underwriting rules and risk and things like that. So can that all be ingested and the explainable AI tell you how it arrived and what regulations is it compliant with?
Sure. No, good question, and the answer is yes. It's been challenging in terms of this area around text and language. The area is called natural language processing or natural language understanding, and one of the biggest challenges is a lot of the approaches to AI have focused on having a big set of labeled data. So it was very time intensive. It meant that there had to be a tremendous amount of setup for people to really understand the ontology, which is the concepts and how the concepts related to each other specific to different domains. What we've been able to do is incorporate a different approach where the data actually informs the ontology and so allows you to get set up much more quickly and also allows you to do that with a much smaller data set. And so overall the answer is yes, it just takes a little bit of a different approach, but definitely we're making headway there.
That's great, and look forward to that. Please. Come closer to the mic.
On one side, we see CEOs of big banks talking bad about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And on the other side, we see Ripple being implemented by more than 50 banks in the world. So where do you see cryptocurrency in the next 2-3 years? Is it going to replace money, at least in e-commerce transactions?
So Alex or Ken?
I think the next 5 years is there's still going to be a lot more experiments. I think 2016, 2017, when I look at the banks, it was it was 2 years of kind of POCs. There were literally 250 POCs in 2016 with within Bitcoin. I think in order for mass adoption, it's going to take a little bit of time. Where we play, I think the use case is primarily for Bitcoin or for cryptocurrency has primarily been in smart contracts. There's also just right now, I think it's still kind of in the first innings. I think it's going to take 5 years before we actually see mass adoption of mainstream, at least.
Alex, you have something to add?
Yeah, I also believe that there will be more types of money floating around. All these tokens that currently growing number and sometimes confusing, but it's going to be some consolidation, mega tokens, and the nature of money is going to change. It's imminent, right? And almost all the governments, not just banks, are doing certain programs. Look at Sweden, look at Malta, look at the Japanese folks and many other programs. So the nature of money will be coming from both companies and the governments, and the whole mix, and like we talked about unbanked sector, is going to change dramatically. There's a great entrepreneur, by the way, a company called Kesha, if you probably know about them, right? They're trying to address this problem. There are great European projects, Naga and LBX out of Germany and UK that are addressing this type of issue. So trying to reshape the nature of money, make it easier for people to use and create much more democratic way to earn and spend money.
Yeah, so we have a few more questions, but I want a quick one for anyone who wants to take it. FinTech is a global phenomenon. We were seeing FinTech all across. And TiE Inflect, obviously Silicon Valley, which has been the seat of innovation, although TiE has a lot of chapters around the world. But question to you is, where do you see FinTech kind of growing the fastest? I know it moved to Europe and Asia and stuff, but in your experiences, based on your customer and market exposure, where do you think FinTech is growing the fastest?
So I think so far the components which drove the adoption on the FinTech applications is the consumer experience piece. The easier to use, nobody wanted to go to bank and spend half an hour, 45 minutes, where the depositing a check could be a simple 2 minutes job, not even that, right? So those type of applications, they drove the adoption. But now that most of the financial institutes are now offering the similar kind of services, the next level of adoption will be a value add on top of what was there. And I think some of the cases which led to this is the unbundling of the total package. Now some of the rebundling will happen as a result of it. So unbundling and rebundling is a kind of a cycle.
Great.
I think it will take place.
Anyone else has a perspective?
Yeah, I think we're continuing to see obviously a lot of innovation here in the Silicon Valley. We've got the people, we've got the money, and I think we have the secret sauce in terms of developing it. What's really been interesting to me though is to see the long tail in terms of the world is becoming much smaller in so many ways, and so being able to get access to those assets is allowing a lot of people in a lot of different places. And then you're seeing a lot of innovative things happening with some of the governments. So places like Singapore, where I think that they're really aggressively trying to make some investments and really nurture those opportunities. So
Great.
It gets more and more interesting.
Yeah, Singapore is really a hotbed. We were part of the trade delegation last year, and a lot of stuff happening and promoted by the government. Please. speak up, they'll turn it on. Yeah.
So this is regarding ICO. Alex, your company is interesting. You did venture and also ICO. So my question is two-part question. One is for companies which are trying to raise their seed stage, right? Do you recommend for going for ICO versus venture? And second thing is that currently the narrative is, US is kind of, from a regulatory perspective, it's difficult to do an ICO, at least in 2018 versus international. So again, how do you recommend an US company to go about that process? Thanks.
Yeah, great question. And many companies asking the same question to repeat.
That was my question too, so.
Same? Okay. Well, they both are very important. How to fund the company now at the early stage, and also what to do with regulations, especially in the US. The first question is absolutely, every company in my mind should consider ICO. It's a much more democratic way. You don't dilute your company if you do ICO as a utility versus security, which is always a good thing. Keep control over your baby, right, and develop it the way you want. And also bring customers. Like I give you folks two examples, Referium and Sapien. They both decided not to do crowd with the speculators and rather build a program like ambassador style and bring actually users of the system to the mix, right? Rather than just get speculative participants who are going to dump the tokens as soon as the ICO is over. So you have all the tools now to build a company in less dilution, more power from beginning with the real customers that participate and stakeholders in a way, not investors, but stakeholders. You can do hybrid, by the way. If you have a good idea, please let me know. I'm becoming a partner in the ICO fund, and we're talking about early stage investments, like really early. And there are great companies out there coming. I encourage everybody to consider ICO. As for regulations, yeah, it's a mess. Between SEC and CFTC, they have conflicting views. And it will come to the end because there is now pressure from Congress. There's a group of congressmen really challenging them to come to the terms and establish clear rules instead of going and punish companies before the rules are established. The good news is that some states are doing a great job. State of Wyoming already created legislation. Arizona is moving next. Delaware is working on it. I'm becoming part of a committee in California on the blockchain and crypto. We're trying to fix it in California as well. So it will come to the resolution. The Europeans doing a really good job. So they always have a choice to register SPV, the special purpose vehicle, overseas, just to conduct your ICO, and then continue doing business in the US. Of course, taxation is a challenge, but there are also ways to, because they really cover only trading. They don't really cover token economy at the moment, which is a big gap. And we can't use rules from 2014 in 2018, or security rules from 1933. That's completely obsolete. But the good news is that there's more and more people understanding it. The community is building up and trying to propose some good correction to both, regulations on the stock exchange and taxation, right? Very much like French and the UK people did. So please go forward. Don't be hesitant.
Okay. Thanks, Alex. And unfortunately, we're out of time, but the panelists will be available for more questions offline. Please join me in giving them a big hand.